So in the Buddhist tradition, and there is no desire whatsoever to have you become a Buddhist, spare your friends and family. The idea is to become a Buddha, actually, which is much more interesting. And they will like you much better for it. There are three important, they're called refuges or reflections. And I'm talking more than I might at the beginning of a meditation today, just because it feels fitting in the opening of this building. The first reflection is the reflection on Buddha and on our capacity to awaken each of us. And on your seat, there was a little gift for you, a small clay Buddha. And the clay Buddhas are made, they were pressed in a little mold, and they're a mixture of the earth from around the stupa of a monastery, the ashes from the incense that have been burned as people made prayers, some of the leftover dried rice that's been offered as food, the water from the well of the monastery, and then the prayers that are made as they are pressed into the mold. So they actually contain in a mini way the elements of earth and air and fire and water, all coming together in this beautiful way, just as you've come together with those same elements. And yet the elements are more than earth, air, fire, and water because of the prayers and the form and so forth. They're a reminder that there is Buddha, which means awake, the quality of awakening that can come out of this mystery. And it's given to you to remind you that this is who you really are. A friend of mine speaks of years ago being pregnant and giving birth to her first child, and somehow a long, difficult labor, and part of it being alone during that time. It was back in the day when there wasn't quite as much support for women in labor. And she was young and frightened in some ways. She'd done a little bit of yoga. This was still way back in the, I think, early 60s. And struggling with the labor pain, and no one really at certain times there with her, and really quite overwhelmed. But her body kept doing the thing that happens in labor. The contractions just kept coming, and the dilation of the cervix, started to happen independent of anything she wanted. Although I'm sure she was ready to have that baby get out of there, But it was all happening. And at some point she said, I was frightened, I felt alone, I didn't know how to do this, it was so painful. And then something shifted, and I realized that I was life giving birth to itself. And that every mother, every woman, every person in this room was born through this same mysterious process, out of the body of another, out of the body of the one before that. And that was true of beings, countless beings. And instead of being someone who was frightened and alone, I felt that life was using this form to recreate itself through me. And I felt completely safe and trusted and loved. And I knew that this child coming in carried that same life spirit. So you have in your hand the reminder that that spirit was born in you, that you are the one to awaken, and that that capacity is in you. The second reflection is reflection on Dharma. And Dharma is a word that means truth, teachings, path, or the way. And in the Buddhist mythology and tradition, it's said that after his awakening, the Buddha went to the deer park in Sarnath near the Ganges River, near Benares, and met with some of his former yogis and ascetics, and sat under a tree and said, I've found the way to freedom. There is a most wonderful way to free the heart, and it is called the middle path. Neither the rejection of the world nor the grasping of it, but the openness of awareness that can rest in the middle of it all. And then he gave the teachings called the turning of the wheel of the Dharma, that there is suffering in this world, in human life. It has a cause by greed and grasping, by hatred and aversion, by ignorance. And there's an end to sorrow in the heart. There is a freedom that is your birthright, that is possible. And as Zen Master Suzuki Roshi said, when you realize the fact that everything changes and find your composure in it, there you discover nirvana. There you discover freedom. And so he offered these teachings of freedom or awakening, the freedom of the heart, the turning of the wheel it was called. And I've seen it in so many forms. I've seen it with my teacher Gosananda, who was the Gandhi of Cambodia, leading peace march, peace walks and walks of compassion, taking refugees back to their village, singing the chant of loving kindness through what had been the killing fields, and saying you can't go back to your villages without reclaiming your hearts as well as your land. And so we will walk. And for 15 years he led streams of 100 or 500 people or 1,000 chanting from the border back to their villages, singing, hatred never ends by hatred, but by love alone is healed. This is the ancient and eternal law. And that is the teachings of Dharma. Something that we know to be so true that no matter what, no matter how much the body politic would like to frighten you, you've noticed, right? That underneath all of that is a truth that hatred never ends by hatred, but by love alone is healed. This is the ancient and eternal law. And the reflection of Sangha, which means community. I had someone come up to me yesterday in the market, as happens often because a lot of people have come to Spirit Rock, and said, Jack. I said, yes. She said, I don't know if you remember, but I was so distraught when my goddaughter, who I was really close to, died. It was about 10 years ago or so. And a couple of us came to see you, and you came to visit us and did a blessing and prayer and so forth. And then she said, you said something to me that meant so much. And I thought, oh, what did I say? I have no memory at all. Sometimes people say things like that. I didn't even say that, but they remembered it, so it's good. And she looked at me and she said, you looked at us, and at me especially, and you said, don't weep alone. And it was those words that got me through that year of sorrow, when I remembered each time I heard those words that I needed others, that I needed community, that I needed connection with one another. And in this world where we see continuing warfare and racism and environmental destruction, it becomes really clear that no amount of outer development of computers and nanotechnology and biotechnology and internet and all these wild things that we can do is going to stop racism, is going to stop environmental destruction. The technology doesn't do it. It only comes from the human heart. And it requires that we who created these amazing outer forms now develop our spirit in our heart in a way, as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff said, we are a nation of nuclear giants and ethical infants. And it's a little bit time to grow up. And to do it, we need one another. We need a community of those who understand our interdependence with one another, with the air we breathe and the water that we drink and the earth. So our community is one another, but it's really the community of life itself. And we take our seat in meditation then, halfway between heaven and earth in this remarkable human form, amidst an ocean of tears and the unbearable beauty of life, and we open ourselves.